Sarah thought moving into the perfect suburban neighborhood would be a dream come true. But when her HOA issues a shocking $5,000 fine over a trivial violation, her American dream quickly becomes a living nightmare. Now, backed against the wall, she's forced to take a stand against the HOA's ruthless tactics. Little does the power-hungry HOA board know, this single mom is about to unleash a legal hurricane that will leave them paying double the price. The neatly manicured lawns and ornate iron gates of Oakwood Estates radiated an air of suburbia perfection. For Sarah, a 32-year-old single mom, this gated community represented the promise of a fresh start and the idyllic home she had always envisioned for her 8-year-old son, Liam. "Just look at this place, sweetie," she said, gazing out the car window as they approached the grand entrance. "This is where Mommy's new job is, and where we're going to live from now on." Liam pressed his face against the glass, eyes wide with wonder. "It's so pretty, Mom. Do you think the other kids will like me?" Sarah squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Of course they will, honey. Everyone is going to love you." She took a deep breath, feeling a surge of optimism. This was their chance to finally leave the cramped city apartment behind and build the stable, comfortable life they deserved. Little did she know, the veneer of Oakwood Estates' tranquil charm was about to be shattered. The next morning, Sarah stepped outside to retrieve the newspaper, eager to dive into her new role as the community's latest public relations coordinator. But as she approached the mailbox, a bright yellow envelope caught her eye. Her stomach dropped when she saw the official notice stamped across the front. Heart pounding, she tore it open to find a tersely worded letter from the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. "This letter is to inform you that you are in violation of the community's lawn maintenance policy. You have 10 days to trim the hedges bordering your property, or you will be subject to a $5,000 fine." Sarah stared at the document in disbelief. The hedges. That was it? She hurried back inside, Liam's cereal bowl forgotten on the counter. "Liam, we have a problem," she said, her voice trembling. "The HOA is trying to fine me $5,000 for something ridiculous." Liam's eyes widened. $5,000? But that's so much money. Sarah nodded grimly. "I know, sweetie. I'm going to have to fight this. There's no way I can afford a fine that high." She sat down at the kitchen table, mind racing. This was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to provide Liam with the stable, secure home life he deserved. But now, before she could even unpack the last box, the HOA was threatening to bury her in debt. Stealing her resolve, Sarah grabbed her laptop and began furiously researching her rights. There had to be a way to stand up to these bullies without risking everything she had worked so hard for. Little did she know, her fight had only just begun. Sarah spent the next 2 days combing through the Oakwood Estates CC&Rs, covenants, conditions and restrictions, and municipal codes, desperately searching for a loophole. The language was dense and convoluted, but she refused to back down. Finally, on the 3rd day, she found what she was looking for. A clause stating that fines could only be levied for egregious violations that pose a demonstrable safety or property value risk. Trimming a few stray hedges hardly qualified. Emboldened, Sarah marched down to the HOA office, Liam in tow. The stuffy, wood-paneled room was occupied by a trio of stern-faced board members, all of whom eyed her with thinly veiled contempt. "This fine is completely unwarranted," Sarah began, her voice quivering slightly. "The hedges in question pose no safety hazard and don't impact property values. I'm asking you to reconsider." The board president, a silver-haired man named Mr. Bellamy, leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Mrs. Pearson, the rules are quite clear. You have 10 days to rectify the violation, or the fine will stand." "But," Sarah protested. Bellamy raised a hand, silencing her. "That's our final decision. Good day." As Sarah and Liam left the office, her mind raced. She couldn't afford to pay the fine, but the thought of battling the entire HOA board filled her with dread. Still, she knew she had to try. That evening, after Liam was asleep, Sarah pored over her notes, formulating a plan of attack. She would need to file an official appeal, submit evidence, and be prepared to take them to court if necessary. It would be an uphill battle, but she refused to let the HOA crush her family's dreams. The next morning, Sarah set out, determined to nip this crisis in the bud before it spiraled out of control. Little did she know, her fight had only just begun, and the HOA was about to meet its match. Sarah took a deep breath as she approached the imposing, colonial-style HOA office building. Liam fidgeted nervously beside her, sensing his mother's tension. "It's going to be okay, honey," she said, mustering a reassuring smile. "I'm just going to talk to them and see if we can get this whole thing sorted out." Liam nodded, but his brow was furrowed with worry. "I don't like those mean people, Mom. They're so scary." "I know, sweetie, but I promised I won't let them bully us, okay?" Sarah squeezed his hand, then pushed through the ornate double doors. The reception area was empty, save for a bored-looking receptionist seated behind a gleaming mahogany desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyeing Sarah and Liam with barely concealed disdain. "Yes, I'm here to file an appeal regarding the fine you issued me," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. The receptionist's expression didn't change. "Fill out this form and submit it to the board. They'll review it at the next meeting." Sarah accepted the stack of papers, her heart sinking. "When is the next meeting?" "2 weeks from now." The receptionist's tone made it clear the conversation was over. Defeated, Sarah led Liam back outside. "Okay, sweetie, we have some work to do." Over the next several days, Sarah poured her heart and soul into crafting the perfect appeal. She documented the hedges in question, obtained statements from neighbors praising their appearance, and built an airtight case against the fine. Finally, she submitted the package, praying the board would see reason. But when the meeting date arrived, Sarah's hopes were quickly dashed. Mr. Bellamy and the other board members listened to her presentation with stony expressions, then promptly voted to uphold the fine. "This is an outrage," Sarah exclaimed, her composure slipping. "You're punishing me for no reason." Bellamy merely shrugged. "The rules are clear, Mrs. Pearson. Either pay the fine or face further penalties." As Sarah and Liam left the building, she fought back tears of frustration. This wasn't the fresh start she had envisioned. It was turning into a nightmare. But she refused to give up. Somehow, she would find a way to stand up to these bullies and protect her family's future. Little did the HOA know, Sarah Pearson was about to become their worst nightmare. The following week, a process server arrived at Sarah's doorstep with an ominous-looking envelope. Inside was a notice informing her that the HOA had filed a lawsuit to collect the $5,000 fine, plus additional penalties and legal fees. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the details. If she lost, the HOA could place a lien on her home, potentially forcing her and Liam out of Oakwood Estates for good. "What are we going to do, Mom?" Liam asked, his voice laced with fear. Sarah pulled him into a tight hug. "Don't worry, sweetie. I'm not going to let them take our home. We're going to fight this, no matter what." With renewed determination, Sarah began researching local attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes. She knew this battle would require professional legal expertise, but the retainer fees were far beyond her tight budget. Just as she was about to give up hope, a flyer in her mailbox caught her eye. It advertised a free legal clinic run by a local law school, where students assisted low-income clients with a variety of civil matters. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed Liam and rushed to the clinic. After a brief intake interview, she was paired with a third-year law student named Emily, who listened intently as Sarah described her predicament. "This is a classic case of an HOA overstepping its bounds," Emily said, brow furrowed in concentration. "The fine is clearly unreasonable, and they're trying to use the threat of foreclosure to bully you into submission. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. So you think we have a chance of winning? Emily nodded emphatically. Absolutely. With the right strategy, I think we can not only get the fine dismissed, but also countersue the HOA for harassment and emotional distress. Liam's eyes widened. We can make them pay, Mom. Sarah squeezed his hand. That's right, sweetie. These bullies are about to learn a very painful lesson. As Emily outlined her plan of attack, Sarah couldn't help but smile. For the first time since receiving that dreaded fine, she felt a surge of confidence. The HOA had picked the wrong single mom to mess with. The courtroom was thick with tension as Sarah and Emily took their seats at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, the HOA board members sat with their expensive-looking attorney, exuding an air of smug confidence. Sarah glanced nervously at Liam, who was fidgeting in his seat. It's going to be okay, sweetie, she whispered, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. Just then, the bailiff called the court to order, and the judge, a no-nonsense woman with piercing eyes, swept into the room. We are here today to address the matter of Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association v. Sarah Pearson, she began, her voice booming through the speakers. How does the defendant plead? Emily rose from her seat. Not guilty, Your Honor. In fact, we are filing a countersuit against the HOA for harassment and emotional distress. A murmur rippled through the gallery as the HOA's attorney shot to his feet, his face flushed with indignation. Objection. This is clearly a frivolous attempt to circumvent the clear-cut bylaws of the association. The judge raised a hand, silencing him. Overruled. Please proceed, Miss Pearson. With a deep breath, Emily launched into a meticulously crafted argument. She dissected the HOA's fine, highlighting the vague and arbitrary language of the bylaws. She presented sworn statements from neighbors attesting to the neat, well-maintained appearance of Sarah's property. And she skillfully dismantled the HOA's claims, painting a picture of a power-hungry board hell-bent on fleecing its residents. As Emily spoke, Sarah watched the judge's expression carefully. The older woman's brow furrowed in concentration, and Sarah could almost see the wheels turning in her mind. Finally, when Emily had finished her presentation, the judge turned to the HOA's attorney. Counsel, do you have a response? The man rose, his face flushed with indignation. Your Honor, this is a clear-cut violation of our community's bylaws. The fine was levied in accordance with established procedures, and we are well within our rights to pursue collection. The judge's eyes narrowed. Be that as it may, Mr. Harrington, I find the amount of the fine to be excessive and unwarranted given the nature of the alleged violation. As for the countersuit, I'm inclined to allow it to proceed. A triumphant grin spread across Emily's face, and Sarah felt a surge of relief wash over her. They were finally getting their day in court, and the HOA was about to learn a very painful lesson. The courtroom erupted in chaos as the judge's ruling sank in. The HOA's attorney, Mr. Harrington, jumped to his feet, his face flushed with outrage. Your Honor, this is an outrageous miscarriage of justice, he bellowed. The association has followed its bylaws to the letter, and we demand that this frivolous countersuit be dismissed immediately. The judge fixed him with a steely glare. Sit down, Mr. Harrington, or I will hold you in contempt of court. Reluctantly, the attorney sank back into his seat, his lips pressed into a thin, angry line. Sarah glanced over at Liam, who was watching the proceedings with wide, nervous eyes. She gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, silently promising that everything would be all right. Now, the judge continued, her voice commanding the attention of the entire courtroom. I have reviewed the evidence presented by both sides, and I find the actions of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association to be excessive and, quite frankly, an abuse of power. She paused, letting her words sink in. The $5,000 fine is hereby dismissed, and I am awarding the defendant, Miss Pearson, the sum of $10,000 in damages for emotional distress and harassment. Sarah felt a surge of relief and triumph wash over her. They had won. The HOA's attempt to bully her had backfired spectacularly. Mr. Harrington, however, was not ready to concede defeat. Your Honor, this is an outrageous ruling. We will appeal this decision to the higher courts. The judge's expression hardened. That is your prerogative, Mr. Harrington. However, I would caution you against pursuing this matter further. The evidence presented today has made it abundantly clear that the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association has overstepped its bounds and engaged in predatory tactics against its own residents. She turned her gaze to Sarah, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Miss Pearson, you and your son are free to go. Congratulations on your victory. As Sarah and Liam left the courtroom, a sense of elation and relief washed over them. They had stood up to the HOA's bullies and won, and now they had the means to finally feel at home in Oakwood Estates. But the battle wasn't over yet. The HOA was clearly not ready to admit defeat, and Sarah knew they would stop at nothing to try and recoup their losses. She steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead, determined to protect her family's newfound peace and security. In the days following the court victory, Sarah found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She knew the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association was not the type to simply accept defeat and move on. True to her instincts, the ominous envelope arrived in the mail a week later. Sarah's heart sank as she read the contents. The HOA was appealing the judge's ruling, and they were demanding that she and Liam vacate the property immediately. No, 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 she muttered, her hands trembling. They can't do this. Liam peered up at her, his brow furrowed with concern. What's wrong, Mom? Sarah pulled him into a tight hug, fighting back tears. The HOA is trying to make us leave our home, sweetie. But I'm not going to let them, I promise. Steeling her resolve, she marched back down to the HOA office, Emily by her side. The board members greeted them with thinly veiled disdain, their eyes narrowed with hostility. This is outrageous, Sarah exclaimed, slamming the appeal notice down on the desk. You have no grounds to evict us. The judge already ruled in our favor. Mr. Bellamy, the board president, leaned back in his chair, a smug smile playing on his lips. Oh, but we do, my dear. You see, the bylaws clearly state that any resident who files a countersuit against the association is subject to immediate expulsion. Sarah felt her heart drop. But that's not fair. You're the ones who wrongfully fined me in the first place. Bellamy shrugged, seemingly unfazed. Perhaps you should have thought of that before you decided to challenge us. The decision has been made. You and your son have 30 days to vacate the premises. As Sarah and Liam left the office, her mind raced. This couldn't be happening. They had won in court, fair and square. How could the HOA simply ignore the judge's ruling and kick them out? Emily placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, Sarah. We're not going to let them get away with this. I'm going to file an emergency injunction to stop the eviction, and we'll take this all the way back to court if we have to. Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. I'm not going down without a fight. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The courtroom was once again tense with anticipation as Sarah and Emily took their seats, facing off against the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association and their crafty legal team. Order, order, the judge commanded, her voice cutting through the murmurs. We are here today to address the HOA's attempt to evict Miss Pearson and her son from their home, despite the previous ruling in their favor. Emily rose to her feet, her expression resolute. Your Honor, the HOA's actions are a blatant disregard for the law and a clear-cut case of retaliation against Miss Pearson for exercising her legal rights. Mr. Harrington, the HOA's attorney, jumped up, his face flushed with indignation. That's simply not true, Your Honor. Our bylaws explicitly state that any resident who files a countersuit against the association is subject to immediate expulsion. The judge's brow furrowed. Be that as it may, Mr. Harrington, I find the timing of this eviction notice to be highly suspicious, given the previous ruling in Ms. Pearson's favor. This appears to be a thinly veiled attempt to circumvent the court's decision. She turned her gaze to Sarah, her expression softening. Miss Pearson, I understand this has been an incredibly difficult and stressful ordeal for you and your son. But I want to assure you that I will not allow the HOA to trample all over your rights and your family's security. Addressing the courtroom, she continued, the eviction notice is hereby dismissed, and I am further ordering the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association to pay an additional $20,000 in damages to Miss Pearson for their egregious and retaliatory actions. Sarah felt a surge of relief wash over her, and she squeezed Liam's hand, tears of joy streaming down her face. They had won, against all odds. Mr. Harrington sputtered in disbelief, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. This court is adjourned. Miss Pearson, you and your son are free to remain in your home, secure in the knowledge that justice has been served. As they left the courtroom, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and empowerment. She had stood up to the HOA's bullies and emerged victorious, proving that with determination and the right legal team, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome. From this day forward, Sarah knew that her family's home in Oakwood Estates would truly be a place of peace, security, and freedom, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds.